Okay, we're going to make another agenda change if the board is comfortable. Dr. Ernest has requested that we move the assessment update up so he can stay here through that session, and then we will do Ball State and have Ball State present. Are you guys good with that?
Do we need any?
No, I don't think so. We're just moving the items. Okay, the assessment update and approval of the iLearn plan. We can have you start making your way up. I believe that is Dr. Flores. Sure, if you come to the podium so people can hear. And Dr. Flores, if you could just give us 1 second, I'm sorry. It's like herding cats. Cynthia, you can come up too. You're presenting as well, aren't you? Yeah, come on up. You're tag teaming.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Flores.
Okay, I think they're loading the slide. Someone's loading the slides. Yeah, there should be several before this, I believe. Okay. I have several updates to provide today related to several different topics. So the first that I wanted to start with is an update related to our current spring administrations. We concluded the I-STEP Part 2.
Dr. Flores, 1 second. In the back, can you hear her? Can you hear Dr. Flores?
Not well, okay. I'll try to talk more loudly.
I'm wondering, the one we can hear really well on
Do you want me to
the
go
end.
up there?
Can we use the stage mic so people can hear what she's saying?
Or do you want me to hold it?
I think the mic's... Oh, there we go.
Okay, I wanted to provide an update today. We did close the I-STEP Part 2 window last week. We had over 1.5 million test sections completed online successfully, and we are sending out a feedback survey again to the field to elicit additional information about how we can continue to improve that process going forward. I did want to note that you received a memo, I believe, that was provided to some school corporations that were experiencing some difficulty with calculator sections. We are continuing to work through that process with our legal department and also following up with Pearson to make sure that we can define an appropriate path forward for those impacted schools and corporations. I also wanted to note that the iStar window continues to be open as well. We have standard setting planning underway, and I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail in a few moments. ECAs are also continuing through the end of this month as a retest opportunity for students. And I wanted to note that we did post publicly the iRead 3 preliminary results early following this administration, and I'll dig into those in a little bit more detail as well. So in regards to the iRead 3 preliminary data, I believe you received corporation and school level detail surrounding these in advance of the meeting. This is preliminary data in terms of the overall iRead 3 calculation, so we will have a more formal calculation once we can integrate the summer results and then account for students that participate in iStar and make sure that they are also removed from the denominator. These preliminary results will be posted on Compass May 12th, and then we will lift the embargo so that schools and corporations can note this data more publicly as needed. Just for comparison, I did want to go ahead and note these preliminary results so that you can compare from previous administrations. This year we did have 83.4% overall. That is relatively consistent over time. I also just wanted to note that we are still on schedule to report ISTEP beginning on June 16th. We will have data available for all of you around that same date so that you can be made aware of those potential updates at that time. We are, as I mentioned earlier, planning for the I-STAR standard setting process. Those dates are noted as June 19th through 21st for ELA and science, June 26th through 28th for mathematics and social studies. We're working closely with educators to formalize the performance level descriptors that delineate the skills that are required for students across proficiency levels. At this point, considering the population of students that participate in I-STAR, we have been working on appropriate ways to define those proficiency levels because did not pass, pass, and pass plus may not really lend themselves well to that population. We are soliciting feedback on the 3 that are noted here as developing proficiency, meeting proficiency, and exceeding. So I can provide a more formal update at the next meeting once we've solicited more feedback there. And now we're going to transition into updates from 1003. I think Cynthia is going to be joining me for part of this as well. We have outlined the proposed assessment plan, noting that this could be either computer adaptive and or fixed form. So in grades 3 through 8, obviously, we have iLearn for ELA. In mathematics, that goes through grade 7. In grade 8, we do have the consideration of offering the Algebra 1 ECA for students that are enrolled in that course in grade 8. In science and social studies, science, we are proposing to continue to administer that in grades 4 and 6, and then social studies in grade 5. In high school, we are transitioning to the end of course assessments, so we'll walk through this in a little bit more detail. It is noted that a college entrance exam may be offered in high school for students that have completed that Algebra 1 requirement in middle school. But again, we'll dig into that in a little bit more detail soon. Cynthia, do you want to start here?
Some things that were taken into consideration as this plan was put together, of course it aligns from the utmost, it aligns to 1003, but we made sure that growth and performance for grades 3 through 8, which are required by ESSA, and the current process that we use for calculating growth will continue under the proposed plan. And students in taking taking Algebra 1 in middle school will no longer be required to double test, but will take an appropriate, more rigorous assessment in high school just like other students. But the double testing will be gone.
Sure. What does that mean?
Double testing, so if a kid
No, I know double testing.
Right.
Rigorous, what's the plan?
ESSA allows for us, for middle school students in grade 8, if they want to use their ECA assessment as their accountability test versus taking the grade 8 iLearn test, then ESSA, if we want to use the ECA test for grade 8 accountability, then in high school they still have to take an additional more rigorous assessment. Most high school kids will take a more rigorous assessment because they'll take in English, for example, the grade 10 ECA.
And that's not been identified as of yet. The more rigorous.
Right, that has not been identified. but a college entrance exam, and, the two most popular, and we'll see.
Who sets the cut scores then?
Who sets the cut scores? That will become part of the board's decision. We'll have to have further discussion about what is appropriate for these students at this higher level.
What's the timeline for that?
What is the timeline? 2018-19, we need to have this in place.
So this will be spring of 19
Right,
tests.
right.
What's the timeline for setting cut scores? Who's involved in setting cut scores? Is it, I don't know. I'm just,
Right,
sorry, keep going.
Right. First, we have to identify the assessment, and then we will have to, part of our discussions that'll probably stem around the assessments identified for ESSA and the accountability piece identified for ESSA. Those discussions will include what would be appropriate for the cut scores if we do a formal standard setting like we do for the other assessments, which is ordered item booklet, or if we take a different path. We will include our technical advisory committee to advise us on the most appropriate path for these particular students, because it's a slightly different animal.
Thank you.
All right. Concerns. Okay, in this shift in this assessment, again, it'll be in place in 2018-19. For 2017-18, we know we've got I-STEP will continue. In order to move from I-STEP given in only grade 10 to ECAs given starting 18-19, we will have one subset of high school students who will not have an accountability assessment available. And my hint is it's not English. English will go straight into the grade 10 ECAs in 18-19. So I've created a visual. This is our current accountability test for mathematics. And these are not all our pathways, but it sort of hits the majority of them. So you've got middle school students who take Algebra 1 and they enter freshman year taking Algebra 2 or geometry. They hit grade 10 taking Algebra 2 or geometry. By the time they are in grade 10 in spring of 18, they'll have an ECA available. Then they'll go on taking pre-calc or calc. Pre-calc junior year, calculus senior year. That's an assumption. Of course, other pathways might occur. Grade 9, you have students who enter grade 9 taking Algebra 1 this year. Next year, they will take, in 18, they'll be in Algebra 2 or geometry. The following year, junior year, they'd be in Algebra 2 or geometry, and then pre-calc, again, making some assumptions. But by grade 10 in 2018, they're still taking, next spring, they're still taking grade 10 I-STEP. That's their accountability test. And then you've got another pathway where you've got your more struggling students who enter freshman year taking algebra spread over 2 years. Algebra 1 Part A this year, next year it's Algebra 2 Part B. But still, by the time they finish Algebra 2 Part B, when they will be taking the grade 10 I-STEP, and then they could continue on some other pathways to hit their math requirements for high school. So for next year, hitting the accountability test isn't an issue. However, come spring of 18, we shift everything. Our freshmen entering spring of 18 who have had middle school algebra, they're still okay. They're going to be on their Algebra 2 or geometry track for grade 9 and grade 10. And then by grade 11, they're taking some higher order assessment. It might be SAT or ACT. It could be some other assessment per the RFP for college readiness. But those are the examples I put in. But they're covered. Our freshmen next year are covered if they took middle school Algebra 1. Our freshmen next year who are in algebra spread over 2 years, going to the bottom row, they're covered. We're going to have an ECA in place by the time they're in grade 10, because in 19 we will have an ECA in place. Our problem comes in for our freshmen next year who enter taking Algebra 1 only. The ECA doesn't start until the following year, which would be a year after they complete Algebra 1. They're already taking Algebra 2 or geometry. If they happen to be on an Algebra 2 track, they might be okay. If they're on a geometry track, they're really now having to recall some facts from the year prior. So we've got a hole. I don't know what accountability assessment to give to these Algebra 1 students for freshman year next year. And it, of course, Algebra 1, as a freshman, happens to be our largest population of students. So a proposed solution would be, given that the grade 10 ISTEP, as it is currently developed, is based on content from Algebra 1 and grade 8, if we allow our entering freshmen in 2018 who are in Algebra 1 to take that grade 10 test while in grade 9, allow that for accountability purposes, it's actually very similar to them taking an ECA because it is aligned to only Algebra 1 and grade 8 content. But that would then cover us for our accountability purposes.
Would there be anything on that grade 10 test that would not have been covered? When you're going to have a month's time there that would not have been covered in grade 9?
It shouldn't, so long as we make sure that the schools are informed now. It's one of the reasons why I want to make sure we don't wait on this. The schools may have to do some planning to make sure that their curriculum is in place, if in case any content would have to be
So we can lay out
totally.
critical standards that will cover every single standard that could be tested.
It
on
should
this
be,
test.
it should be. See, right.
Why, okay, I'm looking at specific, two questions really.
Sure.
So the middle line, you want to go back a
Sure.
slide? That middle line is one we're concerned about, right?
I don't have an accountability test. No,
So why don't we use our ECAs?
The problem with the current ECAs that the juniors and seniors are taking is that it is aligned to the old grad standards, it's the old GQE. It is not aligned to our current college and career ready standards, all right? So a modified test would have to be created.
And the current one won't work.
Huh?
The current one will not work.
The current one will not work. It would have to be modified, and then we run into this problem. Okay.
You need to simplify this for me.
All right.
Because the test is not aligned to the standards or?
The new college and career ready standards that we had to start assessing in 2015. Our current juniors and seniors fell under the prior standards, and that's the problem.
Thank you. Okay, my other question is, if you go up to the top row and you have those kiddos who are taking, no, next slide.
Oh, sorry. Oh, top row,
Go
sorry.
to the top row, and the SAT, ACT, so those kids will be taking something that'll be a cutoff score in the SAT or ACT, is that what you're saying?
Or another college entrance exam. I use that as a placeholder. I should have changed my wording.
Okay, those are probably pretty good math students.
Problem.
And what do we do with this pretty good math students who have test anxiety or whatever, for one reason or another, don't reach the standard? They don't have much time left for, to retake. That's a very, year and a half or less to retake those tests.
I completely concur, and I believe that through their identification in middle school, that this will be their accountability test. We need to make sure that, and we would work with the department to make sure those students are identified to receive whatever additional remediation, training, so forth, through freshman and sophomore years. Therefore, by the time they enter junior year, they're good to go.
Okay, but what about the ones who don't? They're the ones getting shortchanged by time. A year, 3 semesters at the most to get rehabbed, if you will.
Right.
Mathematically rehabbed, that's another term. But they're the ones who are going to be shortchanged with time and have fewer opportunities than to take some sort of hang on a second, some sort of a qualifying exam that will get them to the GQE. Am I correct with that?
Except for, we're not talking GQE right now. This is purely for accountability, state accountability purposes.
Okay, but they're not going to be included, or they're just not going to make it? We're talking about a small percentage of kids, but
Right.
this board is concerned about all kids.
We have not defined what the grad exam will be, if this will be their grad exam or not. That simply has not come to the board for that discussion. It needs to come soon, but we are not talking the grad exam pathways at the moment. This is purely for accountability purposes. They pass, they don't pass based on that.
Because what percentage of our students take algebra in the 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade?
So total 8th and ninth grade is like 78%.
But in the middle school, because these are the kids we're talking about, what percentage is that? Okay, so those students who are taking algebra at the middle level, for accountability purposes, they will do this. So if they don't hit the threshold, whatever is decided, accountability-wise, we're in trouble as a district or a school. However, the student can use another pathway to get to a GQE.
Right.
So the student isn't necessarily penalized because they will have multiple options. Hence the concern about end of the course assessments that we've been talking about for months.
Multiple options from what period of time?
They'll have multiple options from the very beginning, and one of those from the very beginning of high school. So yes, so they won't be in their 11th, their junior year scrambling, because that's a chunk of kids that are usually our higher performing students. They may not hit that threshold that College Board or ACT deems college ready. So then what do you do with that? If they don't hit it in math, then they're going to have to look at alternative pathways. So that's where, as a state board, when we look at those alternative pathways to GQE, because Indiana is adamant to hang on to a GQE at this point still, when we look at that, we're going to have to be smart on setting those guardrails and those options so that those students who may not, I agree with you, who may not hit that for whatever reason, aren't put in a bad situation where what are their options? So I think we'll be okay. This is just accountability that might be dinging the high schools may not love this in the end because it may be a higher percentage not hitting that threshold than we think.
Probably not.
But regarding the GQE, the pathways that were identified in 1003 include things like dual credit and AP and so forth. And these students will hopefully be hitting the grad exam pathway through dual credit or AP before they even take this test. Yes.
The SAT and ACT that's up there, is that a new proposal?
The 1003, and again, that's my typo, I should have changed that wording. 1003 specifically refers to some sort of college entrance exam. SAT and ACT happen to be the most common. That doesn't mean that's where we will land.
So then you're presenting this today to us as a point of information, or are you looking for approval?
I need approval of the plan, and then I need approval of what tests to give for these grade 10 algebra, or these entering Algebra 1 students next year.
However, there are some unknowns here, right? There's a number of unknowns.
As to what the assessment will actually be. Right, because the RFP hasn't gone out, none of that. But for us to be able to move forward with the RFP, we need the board to approve what the plan is for the outline of the assessment system.
Why?
Because it's in 1003.
Well, we're looking at an assessment system, right?
Right.
We're not looking at a bunch of pieces that we approve and then we all put it together and hopefully it all works, right? According to ESSA, we're supposed to create a system. A system is all the parts together interrelated because they are interrelated with each other.
Right.
And there's a lot of information, key information that's missing from this. So I'm really uncomfortable looking at piecemeal like we've done before on this board, and then we put it together and there are some issues. We don't know what the test is. Then that has implications for all of this. So what I'm looking for is a system.
But we can't move forward with the RFP until you guys approve approve this plan. That's in 1003, that you guys have to approve this granted outline, if you will, before we can even put the RFP out.
Why?
Because it's in 1003. Because 1003 states that the board must approve what the plan, that's my understanding, that the board needed to approve what assessments we were going to use for accountability purposes.
But there's a recommendation we adopt SAT and ACT, right, in your plan?
No. Again, that's a typo. There's a recommendation that we adopt a college entrance exam. It has not been defined.
So what are we approving today? I mean, we're 15, 20 minutes into this with a lot of information. Is it just that chart
That chart.
we're approving?
And what tests for these entering freshmen to take who are Algebra 1 kids?
1 year only, right?
1 year only. It's a 1 year, fill the gap. Yes.
Only for accountability. Nothing to do with their graduation.
Precisely, only for accountability purposes.
So what's the I-learn test that's being recommended?
Sure. So we're developing the RFP based on what's defined in 1003. We have a draft that we will provide to state board members in about 2 weeks for you to provide feedback on how we're delineating that before it goes publicly for
Why can't we issue the RFP, decide on a test, plop it into the chart, and then approve the system versus approving piecemeal? Why can't we do that?
So in the RFP, we are delineating it more as a system. The challenge in this public forum is making sure that we don't compromise that process by delineating the details here.
So then why are we discussing it and approving it, approving what you have today? Is that a policy decision up there? Or is that an implementation?
It's our recommendation for the implementation.
For implementation, right. This is a policy board. I don't see any policy things happening. Once I determine that you're not making a recommendation on a test, then implementation's handled by the department. And our state superintendent decides on implementation issue. It doesn't come to the board for a 30, 40, 50-minute presentation.
Okay, in 1003 specifically, it states, "The board shall authorize and oversee the department's development and implementation of the Indiana Learning Assessment Readiness Network, iLearn, including establishment of criteria for requests for proposals for statewide assessments developed or authorized under this chapter."
Where's the criteria? We're approving criteria you said as part of that statute. Where's the criteria that we're approving today?
Please.
It's in a separate memo in the board packet that is right after these materials. It concisely lays out the two recommendations, and this is basically general authorization to move forward. The board will still oversee and authorize the RFP, the specifics, but this is just go forth with these basic recommendations that are delineated in the new iLearn law.
Can we go forward without us approving that today?
You know, while they're talking, David, I think one of the pieces on this was from an implementation standpoint, because 1003 used a lot of what came out of ISTEP panel, and the implementation was a piece of. We wanted the board to have some oversight because we all know that if we're honest, the ISTEP test itself was sound. It was implementation that was a lot of the issue, right? So you have to remember at that time, and this would be nothing with the current administration, but we felt like, I hate to say it like it is, we felt like there had to be oversight of how that plan came together. So that is in the, I mean, they're stating that correct. So my opinion would be, we'll see what he says, my opinion would be yes, we do. Because that's in there, and I think it's an important piece that we, because one of the pieces that we talked about in there was, we keep getting hammered on the decision, we didn't have anything to do with some of the things that happened, right? So we believe there needed to be some oversight of, and oversight's probably not the right word, but some type of oversight of the implementation piece of it moving forward. So that's why that, I don't know if that helped any or not, but I'm pretty passionate about that was in there. Those were some of the pieces that as I watched that law still needed to be in there for me to be comfortable.
That makes more sense to me, the oversight ability, and that's what we were missing last time, and then the implementation part of it was not the way that it should have been. I guess I'm asking, what policy decision are we making up there? Are there any, I see someone nodding no, there's none. And, you know, we have a major agenda item coming up, and I'm looking at time, and I'm wondering, is this the best use of our time?
So I think, yes, if you just flip to the memo, that would be what we would recommend the board to approve. This is a general framework. The board, we want to keep the board in the loop every step of the way. Now it's going to get more specific. The board will be involved in those decisions as well under its Now the statute says, as you said, oversee.
Okay.
Right, including review of the
Thanks for the
RFP.
clarification. I
So-
think I have my answer.
Yes.
So Brian, before you sit down, at this point then, what do you need us to, we need a recommendation to approval of
The memo.
the memo.
A motion and a second for the vote.
Do we have a motion?
Can you go to the memo? Where is it?
Or, do you have, I'm sorry, do you have further information to present?
Memo, the last page, in this section.
The only other point that I would note is related to the last slide that Cynthia presented with the proposed solution. We will work with TAC to determine if there are any potential impacts psychometrically with providing that I-STEP assessment in grade 9 as opposed to grade 10 and delineate a plan for resolving those in advance. But I wanted to make sure that was noted.
Where's the memo?
Cynthia, while they're looking too, can we go back? I want a little bit of clarification from, I know you'll be able to give it. When BJ was asking about the alignment of standards with that test, the I-STEP 10.
Right.
You said should be. What would make it not be?
Okay, I guess I view this a little bit as the alignment issues any of our assessments have right now on I-STEP. For example, because it's broken into the two pieces, we've got the portion in March and then whatever. So schools prepare for that. By knowing early enough, they're able to prepare for that to make sure that their students are ready for I-STEP when it starts. Us making sure schools know right now, if their curriculum happens to not be in alignment with that, they would have that time necessary to get prepared. And I'm saying if, because I don't know. I don't know their curriculum. And their
You
pacing.
say on the
and so
school
forth.
side, not on our side. Okay,
Right, right.
that was what I needed,
Right.
I needed clarification.
And
on.
again, us approving now, school's not out now, not out yet. It's close, but it's not there yet. Allows the department to inform the schools, this is going to be the accountability test for your kids. And it allows them that time necessary to prepare to make sure those kids are ready for the assessment come next March.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, all I would say on that is, we've got to figure out and make sure, and again, this is not saying anybody won't, but we got to make sure when this goes out, that everybody understands this. Because how many times in the last couple, 3 meetings, we've talked about, well, so-and-so didn't understand this, we thought it was this, somebody says it's this, somebody else says, we got to make sure that everybody understands this totally. Like gets it, right? Because we're even sitting here right now, looking at each other going, I'm not, and asking for, and that's not on anyone, I'm not saying it. I just want to make very clear, we need to have this out to the schools to where we understand as a school exactly what it is that's going to happen. What does alignment look like for that? What are we going to use? Okay, and again, I'm not saying that against anyone, I'm just making sure, I just want it on the record from me, we need to make sure that's done.
I concur.
So Cynthia, what would this do if we tabled this to provide the board with more detailed information? So as far as the RFP timeline, which I know that's your concern, is that a possibility or is that out of the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, the timeliness of the RFP would be my biggest concern. At this point, given our conversations with IDOA, we have a very tight schedule to maintain. So if we tabled this decision until June, it will delay ultimately the award of the contract by that same duration. So it's likely that we will be behind if we do that.
So what? Yeah, so what, for a month later?
Do you want me to? I'll be going. So we'll end up running into the same problems we've had over the last several years. Schools won't have the good blueprints, the assessments, the manuals that are created will have errors in them. All the errors that happen when you're rushing at the end, that's where we would be. There's more potential for mistakes when you shrink that timeline. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
I've certainly complained about.
And we don't want that to happen.
I get it.
Right.
I get it.
I would say, in my own opinion, the chart that you see is just a very generic outline that was put in 1003 by our legislators, giving us permission now to move forward with an RFP so we can get proposals, we can get costs. You'll be involved in that entire RFP process, and then you'll be able to continue making decisions based on the responses that we get back from potential vendors.
I'm prepared to move forward with this, and I would like to understand what form of resolution you'd like. But first, I think really what we're doing is we're just giving the department the green light to kickstart the RFP process. You know, we're going to be getting a ton more information, input, et cetera. We'll have plenty of opportunities to weigh in. But to me, this is just, I would urge against delay, and I think let's give you guys the green light to move forward and get going on this, because it's too important, I think, and I don't want to see us delay. So what form of resolution do you need? Just approving the memo, or?
Approving the memo will take care of everything. If you feel the need to break it into two votes, that would be your purview.
Well, I would just make the motion that we approve the memo that has been submitted to the board and authorize the department to proceed in accordance with the memo in the state law that was just passed.
Is there a second? Any more discussion? Steve?
My question is, here's the memo, it's one page. Is this what we're approving?
Yes.
So all the other materials, all the complexity, we're not approving today? Is that
Correct. Correct. The RFP process, Charity will be speaking to that, and you will definitely be looped in the review of the RFP also.
A second ago, you mentioned two things if we wanted to divide it. That
would be-
confused me. There's only one, is there another?
The piece at the bottom is the second piece.
The what?
The paragraph regarding fixing our hole for Algebra 1.
Oh, the bottom of it?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
thank
the
you.
two pieces.
Steve?
A couple questions. Does this, let's go to the chart, will you? Does that allow us to enter the process, the testing assessment process, at the ground floor level of ESSA and state legislation?
I would believe so, yes, because this meets the minimum criteria laid out by ESSA.
I saw some squirming back there. Anybody else want to respond? I believe you, Cynthia. Does anybody else have a differing opinion? This allows us to enter at the base level of what is required by ESSA and what is required by 1003. Correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
We weren't comfortable going elaborate at this point.
And with Dr. Freitas on this, how do we make sure that what we approve in the future remains there? Does this keep us there? This chart keep us there?
This is the model that we're using to delineate all of our next steps. So going forward, this is how we will elaborate from going forward.
Okay, so that was I meant for that to be a yes or no question.
It's yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Second question is, can we go back to where we had the Algebra 1 kids? Has the field seen this, the field being high schools and math teachers and guidance counselors and principals and
This has not been
have
shared.
they seen that?
This has not been shared broadly. This is the information that I feel needs to be shared quickly because of this hole that does become created.
Okay, so we're going to share this with the field.
Right.
Once we vote for this, and assuming it's approved, the framework is approved, so we're going to share this information with the field? Mm-hmm. And will we get a report back on their responses, the board?
Sure. Yes, and Charity, Dr. Flores has created a
An advisory group.
Sure.
Speak to that.
Yeah, so we have initiated an assessment implementation advisory group that's made up of educators, STCs, CTCs, that we can use to confirm that the guidance we're providing can be interpreted correctly.
Okay. Do we know who that is?
This is the section that concerns me, this transition
Yes.
with this group, because it's the largest group of students, and it's going to, and we can say it doesn't impact the students, but it's the accountability piece that's going to impact the high school grade.
Right.
And so it's going to be the piece that we're going to have those schools standing before us and concerned about their grade.
When we made the shift in 1003, we were very open about, we moved away from ECAs to a non-ECA specific test, and we're moving toward that. When you do that, when that decision was made, we knew, we were very open about this is going to be a problem during the transition. So we knew it wasn't going to be exactly clean, there's no good way to do it, so we're trying to make it as the least disruptive and as fair as we can possibly make it. So that's that muddiness from going away from ECAs back to an ECA with fit transition in the middle. So we will be diligent in communicating with the field. There are a lot of unanswered questions in this, and it goes back to what comes out of that RFP, what vendors respond to it, what kind of responses they give, how do we define an ECA? There's a lot of chatter about that. So there's a lot of unanswered questions that go into this that we will keep you all very well informed, because this is a huge shift for the state of Indiana in a lot of ways, and we want to use as much flexibility that ESSA will allow us to use within the guardrails of 1003. So 1003 at the 3.8 was pretty broad. Once you hit high school, it tightened it right up. So we're trying to muddle our way through that and do what's best for students and schools as well. So
I have a question back to the chart, if you can bring that back up. It says toward the top, second line, computer adaptive and/or fixed form. Obviously, those are two really different kinds of way to approach it. So if we give approval today, what will the RFP ask for? Will it ask for both? Will it ask for one, and if so, which one?
The RFP does delineate that further. I feel like if I disclose that at this meeting, it could give vendors an unfair advantage, but I can provide other information in the interim if you would like that.
Can you share with us if you're asking for pricing on both?
I don't think I can answer that right now.
And why is that? It gives an unfair advantage if we state publicly before the RFP is issued, is that what you're saying?
I'm trying to be very mindful of that.
Okay.
okay, any other comments?
This will be a part of, this discussion will also be a part of the stakeholder assessment groups that are going to begin meeting on Friday too,
That's
for
correct.
ESSA, correct?
Yep.
Yes, and I'm facilitating that conversation. And Cynthia will be there.
Any other questions or comments? There's a motion on the floor with a second. Can we take a roll call, please?
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Yes.
Mr. Watts,
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker,
Yes.
Dr. Yeager,
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Dr. Ernest, are you going to be leaving us?
Yes, I will.
Next item on the agenda, Ball State Authorizer, hearing regarding the Hoosier Academy virtual, I'm sorry.
So typically, our updates are done after all the business, but because there were some votes that had to go, this was moved up. So there's more of the presentation. Do you want us to just put it back under updates or continue right now?
You guys want updates? We'll just put it under
Okay.
updates. Thank you. Hang on.
Superintendent, we have a request for a public comment from John Alcesser. Is that okay with?
Regarding Hoosier Virtual?
No, regarding the choice schools.
Sure.
Okay.
So we will move on to our next, are we going to do public comments now, or are we going to have Ball State present before we do public comments?
he's ready now, and it'll be brief.
Okay, and then we'll have the Hoosier virtual comments next,
Yes.
and we'll do all the
Right
comments
after.
at first.
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning. John Elsesser with the Executive Director of the Indiana Non-Public Education Association. Originally, I was not going to provide any comment, but I thought in lieu of the vote, I'd make some comments relative to the waiver request, if that was okay. I thought it'd be helpful to provide a little broader context on that particular issue. I've been working with the 3 schools that were considered for waiver today for about 2 years on the particular issue that was addressed. And in all honesty, they were really the impetus behind the language in 1384. If there is any schools that are going to meet the criteria of that bill, it's those 3 schools, because they were really the reason that that language was put into the bill. All 3 of those schools serve very high-need populations and are really vital to their local communities. Just a little bit of context in terms of background. I guess as I look at 1384, and it's not in the law that way, but from my interpretation, there's really 2 variables to the formula. One is there a circumstance that merits that the state board takes a second look at that school outside of what the current law already says? And the second part of that is, can the school demonstrate that they've made significant improvement, or that the majority of the students have made academic improvement? And from my perspective, these 3 schools do that. But in terms of background, back in 2016, many will remember, the General Assembly fast-tracked a bill, Senate Enrolled Act 200, which was kind of a hold harmless bill because of the change in assessment, the change in standards, some of the problems with I-STEP administration and the scoring, and then the significant drop in the I-STEP results. And we believe that the legislative intent of that Senate Enrolled Act 200 was that schools would not be harmed because of those changes. And to a great extent, that was accomplished through both Senate Enrolled Act 200 and a subsequent board resolution that the board voted on addressing charter and traditional public schools. And if you remember that hold harmless piece, there was 2 parts to it. There was a part about application of grade, holding harmless in terms of how grades were applied. And the second part dealt with the application of consequences. And the consequence piece dealt primarily with choice schools. And what it said, and I'll read the language because there's some options and interpretation. It really is why these 3 schools, we have been trying to address their concern. This is the language from Senate Enrolled Act 200. It says, for the purpose of determining whether a school has become newly eligible for consequences under, and it gives a code through another code, based on the category or designation of a school performance signed by the state board, the department may not apply consequences unless the school is placed in the lowest category or designation in 2014. It talks about schools that are new to consequences. At the time, the department interpreted that as saying a school that was not in consequences coming into consequence. We would contend another interpretation was these schools were in consequence, they were a double D, and they went to a higher level of consequence, so they went to new consequence. But the department's interpretation was that it was just coming in as new. We tried to work with the department for an administrative remedy for these 3 schools, and they just did not feel the statute gave them that flexibility. We then went to the state board staff, and the state board staff did not believe that it was within their jurisdiction to try to appeal it to the state board. That's what precipitated 1384. So these schools technically were harmed because of the change in legislation, or the change in assessment, and none of them used the hold harmless for their grade. They earned the grade they got, they just, from a consequence perspective, were not held harmless. So we've been trying to remedy that situation for a couple years. Now, if we fast forward to where we are today, the schools have dramatically improved their grades. 2 have gone from D's to A's, 1 has gone from a D to a B. Also, we were able to get a legislative remedy put in the law, which gives you the opportunity to at least provide an appeal hearing, the same kind of an appeal that would be available to traditional publics and to charters. And Mr. Henry's correct. The law is a may. It's an option for the state board to consider. Dr. Yeager had mentioned a comment, and I do agree that we're talking about precedent. But I have to also tell you that when you look at the numbers, there are 9 schools statewide in consequence. We're not talking large numbers. 6 of those are in ongoing consequence, 3 are in new consequence. So there's not going to be, and I would say a number of those schools could not make the case for an appeal. These particular 3 schools, I said, are basically fit the criteria, that we believe from the school perspective. So I just wanted to provide that additional context for you, so you understood the background of where those 3 schools came from and why they brought that appeal to you today. So I thank you for the time, for the opportunity to add those comments.
Thank you. We'll go into comments over Hoosier Virtual. Is that, Brian, are we ready for that?
We are.
Okay.
To answer John, I think some of the concerns we raised today were the timing issue, the fact that this happened right after the legislative session. So, if we're able to create some of those guidelines, criteria, et cetera, maybe there's an opportunity down the road. But I think for today, it's just, from a timeliness standpoint, it's too much of a challenge.
Brian, you want to full names, please?
Yes. Looks like Chloe Dunlap.
Good morning. I wanted to introduce my 2 daughters. This is Chloe Dunlap, and this is Sophia Dunlap. They're both students at Hoosier Virtual Academy. If you remember, I spoke to you all at the March meeting to advocate for Hoosier Academy, and I brought the whole family with me today because it's that important to us. And Chloe is in 5th grade at Hoosier Virtual Academy. She's been there for 2 years now, and Sophia is in 1st grade. She has been virtual only. She has never gone to public school. So one of the things that I mentioned to you in March was that when Chloe started at Hoosier Academy, we felt like she was about 6 months behind in the curriculum, being in the public school system versus Hoosier Academy. And that was one of the things that we found to be a benefit of Hoosier Academy, because they tended to have a more classical, in my mind, method of teaching that didn't necessarily teach to the test, which is what we felt like the public school system was doing for us. And so they have put together a paragraph that Chloe's going to read to you.
Hoosier Academy is a great school. My sister and I really enjoy school with Hoosier Academy. My favorite subjects are history and literature, and my sister Sophie really enjoys science and history. In science, Sophie really enjoyed learning about the human body, and her favorite part about history was learning about the Trojan War. These are 2 things that Sophie would not have had the chance to learn about in traditional public school because science and history are not really taught in kindergarten and 1st grade. Literature is one of my favorite subjects. I really loved reading about John Henry and the other American tall tales, and I also enjoyed the classic story of Don Quixote. In history, I liked learning about the American Revolution. When I came to Hoosier Academy in 4th grade, I had not had the chance to learn about any of these things, and I was a little behind in some things. I have now caught up and really enjoy school. We also like some of the extra things that we have time to do. We get to make crafts, go on field trips, and watch movies that go along with our lessons. I really like that we are learning so much, and I feel like I am learning a lot more than I would if I was in public school still. I also like being able to do school at home because I get help from my mom as soon as I need it, and I can work at my own pace. If I want to do more than 1 history lesson a day, I can, and I don't have to wait for the teacher to tell me what we are going to work on. I also like that in composition I can work on my stories and papers as long as I want to. I like not having to wait for other students before I can go on to other subjects too. I also like that we can finish school early so we have time for extra activities like karate class. My karate class is in the middle of the regular school day, but because I can work at my own pace, I can go to the class. I'm really glad that my school schedule allows me to participate in these things, and I'm really glad that we started Hoosier Academy.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Ms. Swartz? Lina Swartz?
How are you? I'm Lynette Swartz, and I've prepared our Hoosier story to share today, but just out of respect of your time, I just wanted to know that we have had a very successful experience with Hoosier, and we are here to support our school, and we just ask that you would support our school as well. And I would be happy to talk to you after the meeting if you have any questions about that. Thank you.
Jacqueline Chandler?
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Chandler. I am a sophomore at Hoosier Academy. I've been a part of Hoosier Academy for 3 years now. I attended public brick and mortar school before I transferred to Hoosier Academy. I went from the time I was in kindergarten till 8th grade. So part of the reason that I came to Hoosier is that I was bullied very severely in public school, and my anxiety began to worsen due to being bullied, and as soon as I transferred, I was given the help that I needed, and since I was not very academically challenged in public school because I was an honor student, they have now adjusted my classes to where I am at each subject, and they have also given me the chances to do things out of school and have chances to do things that I'm interested in. I was introduced to Hoosier by a couple of my family's good friends, and I am very glad that they introduced me to it because I've succeeded well with my schooling, and my family and I are very, very thankful to Hoosier Academy, and it has become a very important part of our lives. Thank you.
Olivia Boyce? David Turner? David Turner?
Hello. Hello, my name is David.
David, do you want us to help you with your statement? Just a minute, okay.
Hello, my name is David. I was born dead. My umbilical cord was tightly wrapped around my neck, and I was born not breathing, and my heart had stopped. Obviously, I made it. The doctors suspect that this trauma probably caused my autism. My parents were told I would never talk or show any emotion towards them. Wrong. That I would never interact with people on this planet. Wrong again. And that I will probably need to be cared for and supervised for the rest of my life. College? A specialist would have probably laughed at my mom if she even asked. I inherited my father's ADHD, but like most kids, I like to outdo my parents, and I certainly did that. At 4 years old, the psychologist that tested me reported that in his 22 years of experience, I was probably one of the top 5 worst cases of ADHD he has ever seen. I guess we all need to excel at something. He recommended I be medicated for school. He suggested my parents consider homeschooling or finding a nice church school, as I will probably not graduate and be quite a problem for the school system. My elementary school days were awful. I was constantly on sensory overload. The interventions that were available to the brick and mortar school were more damaging to me than helpful. It took me out of the classroom and away from some of the stresses, but not all of them. It helped my classmates to have a peaceful and productive learning environment, but it isolated me. This did not help me develop social skills or relationships, and it set me up to be an easy target for bullying. There was not enough communication between the school and my mom. When she would ask how was school, I would only remember it was normal for me. Being sent out of class and getting upset was a daily, if not multiple times a day. Routine, I was not unusual, so I would.
That routine was not unusual.
So I always said it was fine or okay. I had no idea I was on the autism spectrum. I never knew the doctors gave my mom such grim predictions for my life. I thank my mom and dad for that. They never gave up, and they never made me feel less than normal, less than loved, less than smart, less than any of my siblings. Math is easy. Numbers make sense to me. Reading, spelling, grammar, not so much. There are rules and exceptions to those rules, and then exceptions to those exceptions. My poor reading skill got me placed in remedial reading class, which pulled me out of regular class for 30 minutes a day. Of course, that made me fall further behind with my classwork. I had a real hard time getting back in step with my class when I returned. And I didn't like the kids teasing me that I had to go to special class to read. My teacher said I had difficulty with what she called transitioning. I figured that meant I had trouble going from my noisy class to the quiet class and back again. I had reading time, library time, and remedial reading. So my mom thought since I hated reading and I was getting enough at school, I was not pushed to read at home. This would become important in just a little while. One day I asked my mom to have a birthday party and invite all my friends from my class, all 28 of them. No one showed, not a single one. That's when I realized I was different, that I really didn't have any friends. My 4 wonderful brothers and sisters were 16 through 19 at that time. They called and texted their friends who quickly found a way over, and suddenly I had a party. They even brought gifts. I was completely lost. By the time I went to middle school for 6th grade, my parents realized that the school system was not fitting me. I was not learning, and my behavior was getting worse. One day, my mom had had enough, and she pulled me out. I remember my mom crying all the way home. She kept telling, I'm so sorry I waited so long. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. She also didn't want me to get mad at the school. It just simply wasn't working. My mom called my dad, and they went to some teacher supply store and bought all sorts of workbooks. Remember how I said I wasn't forced to read at home? My mom sat down that first day, and that is when she found out I couldn't read. I didn't know how to sound out most of the letters of the alphabet, the letters in the alphabet made, nor how to sound words out. I didn't even know how to write my name correctly. I didn't know when to use capital letters or lowercase ones, or some letters I only knew how to draw one or the other, but not both. I didn't know how to write a sentence. I had no idea about punctuation. I could barely read a first grade book. My mom was shocked. How did I get this far without being able to read or write? Again, I watched my mom cry, and she is not an easy crier. Years later, I would find out this was because she was angry and scared and panicked all at once. It was about this time that my mom heard a radio advertisement for K-12 and Hoosier Academy. Mom kept saying she needed help. She didn't know what she was doing, and she was so stressed out trying to do the perfect thing for my education. And to be honest, I'm not the easiest student to have. Even if I am the only one, let's just say I'm glad my mom loves me a lot. She called. She suddenly was so happy, literally, after she was done with the first phone call. She told me I was going to start going to school online, just like the college courses that my oldest brother was taking. I would have real teachers and a real education, and she would still get to help me get caught up to 6th grade, but we would have licensed teachers to help. And all I can say is that I was happy, she was happy. School so far had not been a very positive experience for me. A few days later, UPS showed up with a big box. I was excited to see what was sent to us. But it was only some school books. My mom was thrilled. Me, not so much. Another couple of weeks, and I became a virtual student. At first, I was tested and talked to. I was put in this class and that. It was rough. I thought of quitting so many times, so did Mom. But we got help from a parent-to-parent online help class Connect. Then we got help from our homeroom teacher and the special ed teacher. They didn't just send us an email and hope for the best. They called and talked to us until we had things straightened out. Another person gave us contact information for a person that gets together once a week. Then we got into the swing of things, and we found a system that worked. I began learning. I was able to walk around when I needed to. If I had to growl, or pace, or clap my hands, or hum, or bounce on the ball, I could, and no one would get mad. No one would be interrupted. Well, other than my mom. And I could work it out. We found out that fluorescent lights were irritating to me. I handled it much better now that I am older, but back then I had no idea why I felt that way. At home, I could learn where and what set me off, and I could finally identify it and relay it to my therapist and my parents. They could help me, but I was learning. I see a doctor and a dentist like everyone else, but I also see a couple of special doctors, a therapist, a case manager, and a counselor. These appointments take time and travel, and usually are only during school hours, or they have very few after-school hours available that take months to schedule. Hoosier Academy lets me go to these appointments more regularly because we can be more flexible with our time than brick and mortar school. I don't have to fall behind, and there are more appointments available to us. I have the ability to take my laptop and work with me and work in the car on offline projects, and in the waiting room on their Wi-Fi for online ones. I may miss Live Class Connects, but I can still listen to the recordings. I love the recordings over Live Class Connects anyway. I can pause it, rewind it, I can skip through the stuff I already know, and go straight to the stuff I need more information on. My medications that help me focus and deal with some of my other issues. It's very hard for me to get up in the morning. With the recordings, if I wasn't quite there, that class, I can go back. You can't do that in brick and mortar schools. Myth. Homeschooled kids are socially awkward, isolated, and have no friends. They love the comedian Tim Hawkins. At one of his concerts, he made a few jokes about homeschoolers. What do you call it when your homeschooling mom is talking to herself? A parent-teacher conference. What is it when a graduated homeschooler looks in the mirror? A class reunion. Hoosier Academy is not homeschooling. It is public school online, unless usually at home. We make connections. I personally meet up with friends usually once a week at the library to do schoolwork together. During middle school, we would often do the science labs together, since there were at least 3 of us in the same grade. These same students introduced me to a historical society club that I enjoy, and a dojo with a sensei that understands ADHD personally. So I have made more social connections being in an online school than I did at the brick and mortar school. I have found more people that are better accepting and understanding of me. The teachers make an effort to stay in contact with the students too. There are several that volunteer their time to join a group of us at a weekly get-together at a library in Northwest Indiana to tutor us and make face-to-face connections with us. My teachers are looking at what I am doing now that will affect my study habits and success at college. My sister graduated this past weekend from college. Before Hoosier Academy, my parents were looking for assisted living and group home waiting lists for me. My parents did not start a savings fund for college for me because that was not going to be a concern. Before Hoosier Academy, I didn't think about college because I knew I would never be able to go to college. Now, because of Hoosier Academy, we are looking at colleges and career choices. My little savings account is now a tiny college fund. I'm going to be able to go to college. I believe it is possible. My mom pushes me and works with the teachers on my behalf. She never said she would get me only as high as my autism would let me. My autism was never allowed to be an excuse for me. The most important things that came out of Hoosier Academy are, 1, I learned to read. It is still not my favorite thing to do, but I have the ability to read at my grade level. 2, I am learning, really learning. 3, I have so much support and direction. I am heard, I am listened to. Nowhere else have I gotten so much attention to my needs, not just for me, but for my future. 4, I have made connections, friends that will last me a lifetime. You were asked what our plan B was if Hoosier Academy were to close. It's virtual school. If were to close its virtual school. Plan A was our local public school. Plan B was Mom trying to homeschool me, and Hoosier Academy was actually our Plan C. Third time's the charm. There is no Plan D. If Hoosier Academy virtual school were to end, so would my hope for Core 40 diploma in college. We live in the country where there are no choices for schooling for me. It is either return to brick and mortar that we left, which my parents will never agree to, or continue with Hoosier Academy. There are no charter schools or private high schools within a decent driving distance, and none of them are affordable or accredited. We also cannot afford to just up and move to an area that does have choices. I still do not like school, but I do not want to lose the only school that fits me in a world that usually doesn't. Thank you.
Emma Montgomery.
Hi, my name is Emma Montgomery, and I'm a 7th grade virtual student at Hoosier Academy. I've never spoken in front of a big group of people like this before, so I'm a bit nervous. But this was so important to me that I traveled 5 hours just to be here today. I wanted a chance to speak with you today to tell you why keeping my school open is so important to me. I'm sure you've heard from all students in different walks of life and how our school is able to help them special to their needs. But I'm not sure you've heard from an average student. I don't have an IEP or a 504 plan. I have no learning, mental, or behavioral disorders. I have no illnesses or physical issues that require me to learn at home. And I'm not a genius who can't find the challenge she needs in more traditional schools. I have no special skills or talents, no hope of being a junior Olympian or the next piano prodigy. I'm just Emma, a student who's average. Regular public schools and more traditional settings don't work for me. I'm really not sure why, and my parents and teachers haven't figured out yet either, but they just didn't. I used to go to a regular public school, which is why I know it doesn't work. I was the slow kid. I tried really hard. I honestly did. But no matter how hard I tried, I passed each subject in each grade with D's. They actually tested me to see if I had some learning disorder, but I didn't. I was always put in remedial groups, which the younger kids know for as the slow kids. But for some reason, it still didn't help. I lost all my self-confidence and I hated school. I was convinced I was just dumb. My parents are smart. My big brothers are too. They were always in advanced classes getting special achievements and recognition. And I wasn't like them, and it hurt. I wanted to be like them so much, I would come home from school and cry. Hoosier Academy is different from me. When I started at Hoosier Academy, it took a lot of adjusting. I was way below grade level, but here I am about to finish my 5th school year with them. And now I'm not only at grade level, but above. I'm usually on the honor roll and in more advanced classes. I actually love school now. And with the help of my teachers and family, I have more self-confidence again. I believe in myself, which is something I never had before. How has Hoosier Academy helped me so much? You might be wondering. You would think that a virtual school couldn't have such close relationships with their teachers and students, but you'd be wrong. I have my lessons and my books to read through and work through each day, as well as regular virtual classes with my teachers. Whenever I struggle, even in the smallest bit, my teachers seem to notice faster than they did in my old schools. I guess it's probably being virtual. Maybe they watch their students closer in their work and what they say in the class chat, since they don't see us face to face. Either way, they notice when I struggle sooner, sometimes before I realize I'm struggling with a lesson. When I have problems, I have lots of ways to get help. I can go to my regularly scheduled classes and ask while I'm there. I can email a teacher and get a response in the same day. I can go to online office hours and ask for help. I've had teachers set up small group classes online to help groups of us struggling, and even set up on one-on-one classes. My mom and my dad check my grades each night. They'll notice sooner as well. I have virtual swag class I can attend, which is like a study hall, with teachers available to tutor me. I can also attend weekly swag session in person at my local library up in Maryville, Indiana. I can actually see my teachers face to face. Since I get help faster, I never really fall behind. I always get caught up quickly before it's a big problem. I have some of the best teachers who are very involved in caring about me. I get emails and even phone calls to check up on me and make sure I'm doing okay. I love getting to see and visit with them in person at school field trips and special functions. I'm an average student who's lost in regular public schools and barely gets by and passes with D's. I'm an average school regular public schools just doesn't work for. At Hoosier Academy, I not only do well, I do great. Isn't that what we want for each student in our schools? Great? This school, Hoosier Academy, is great for me. If you close my school and take this away from me, what'll happen to kids like me? School isn't easy. Even now, with honor roll grades, it's hard. But here, I understand what I'm learning, and isn't that what counts? Hoosier Academy isn't just for kids with special needs or the gifted and talented. It's for average kids like me. Thank you.
Our final comment, Philip Klein.
Hi, I'm Phil Klein. I live here in Evansville. My son Peter has been a student at Hoosier Academy since he was a freshman in high school. Because of 2 concussions in lacrosse and football, mononucleosis, and irritable bowel syndrome, he enrolled in Hoosier Academy as a high school freshman. I'll sum up his feelings about Hoosier Academy in an excerpt from a narrative which he wrote for his induction into the National Honor Society. Peter says, Hoosier Academies has been a blessing for me. So many of my teachers have become active in my life and try to help me in any way they possibly can. My AP US History teacher, Mr. White, has been helping me get through these problems this entire year. My English teacher, physics teacher, and Spanish teacher have all also been extremely helpful in my time of need. They have helped me create new schedules, figure out what is due in their classes, and get back on track. Without these people helping me, I do not know where I would be right now. I could not have asked for a better school at this time in my life. Hoosier Academy has helped me through thick and thin, and for that I will always be grateful. Peter is a very good student, and he has profited greatly from Hoosier Academies, and I'll support its continuing approval by the board. Thank you.
Thank you, families, for your attendance and your comments this afternoon. We will now move to Ball State.